Okay, welcome everyone. This is an event organized by European Economic Association Research Committee on ERC grant writing. I'm Nezih Güner at SAMFI in Madrid, and I'm the chairperson of the European Economic Association Research Committee. So what are we going to do today? We are going to share our experiences about ERC, give you a big picture view and some personalized views, and then open the floor for questions. As you all know, ERC has changed the research landscape in Europe in a fundamental way and provides great opportunities for scholars, young and old. So how is the structure going to be? We are going to first have Veronika Zakov from ERC. She's a scientific officer for SH1 panel. She will present a big picture view of ERC process and several important details that we need to know. Then I will pass the floor to Marion Gousset, who's an associate professor at Krestensai, and then to Sarah Oster, associate professor at the University of Bonn. They both received ERC grants very recently. They are in their first year of the grant, so they will share their experiences. And then today we also have Jana Kaut with us from CREA professor at Pompeu Fabra and Barcelona School of Economics. And Jan and I will give you a perspective from the panel's point of view. So that's the little bit the idea. And at the end, we also have two members from European Association of Young Economists, Teresa Esteban Casanellas from King's College London and Javier Rodriguez Ramon from Goethe University. And they will start the question process. They prepared a little bit ahead of time to start the question and answers part, and then we will open the floor. If you have a question, just use the raise your hand button, and then we can call your name, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. You could also write your question in the chat button. This session is being recorded, and then we will post it on EA's webpage as well. So without further ado, I pass the floor to Veronika. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I will share my slides. Okay, I think it should be visible now. Okay, so my name is Veronika Zakov. As I've been introduced, I'm scientific officer at the European Research Council Executive Agency, and I'm going to give you the big picture view of the ERC and the application process and some recent developments. Okay, so ERC is part of Horizon Europe. It represents 17% of the entire Horizon Europe budget. Its budget has been increasing over the different funding cycles since its inception in 2007, and in the future we expect the funding amount to increase further in the next programming cycle with the new financial framework. The ERC provides long-term grants to individual researchers from all over the world to pioneering research projects in any field of frontier research. We organize our work around three main scientific domains: the life sciences, physical sciences and engineering, and the social sciences and humanities. Over 14,000 top researchers have been funded since 2007, since the ERC was created. 93 nationalities of grant holders and over 950 research institutions that have received ERC grants as host institutions. And these are quite prestigious grants with many prizes won by the researchers. The ERC is governed by an independent scientific council with 22 members, including the president. It has full authority over strategy and is supported by the implementing structure, the executive Scientific excellence is the sole criterion of selecting the proposals. individual scientists are supported, so not consortia. The projects are not organized around predetermined subjects, but are bottom-up, and they support frontier research in the fields of science and humanities in all fields. And the projects are selected based on international peer review process. Here's the Scientific Council. In the middle, you see Maria Leptan, who is the president. She's supported by 3 vice presidents for each of the 3 domains. Economics is represented in the council by Thorsten Persson. So here's some more about the structure. So it's the strategy. The European Scientific Council is responsible for the strategy, but the European Commission is also present in the governance, so it's not completely independent. What the executive agency does is execute the annual work program, supports the Scientific Council, implements calls for proposals. We organize the peer review evaluation. We establish and manage the grant agreements with the scientists who have been selected, the grantees. We follow up these, and also we carry out communication activities. So why apply for an ERC grant? The ERC grant offers independence, recognition, and visibility to work on a research topic of your own choice, gain financial autonomy for 5 years, negotiate the best conditions of work with the host institution, attract excellent team members and collaborators from anywhere in the world, and you can move with the grant to any place in Europe if you desire. So there is a portability of grants from the initial host institution to another one if that's what you want to do. And you can also win additional funding if you hold an ERC grant. The main grant schemes are starting consolidator advanced grants, synergy grants, and proof of concept grants if you already hold an ERC grant. The main organizing idea is that depends on how much time has elapsed from the successful defense of the PhD defense. And the synergy grants offer the grants to 2 to 4 principal investigators applying together. And the grants are for 5 years, as I said. The sole evaluation criterion is excellence. So excellence in terms of the groundbreaking nature, the ambition and feasibility of the research project, but also in terms of the intellectual capacity, creativity, and commitment of the principal investigator. The evaluation process is a single submission, but there are 2 steps. In the first step, the panel members evaluate the proposal, only the scientific proposal part 1 and the CV. Then they gather together for a panel meeting in Brussels. They either reject the proposal or move it on to step 2. The step 2 evaluation consists of the panel members reviewing the full proposal, and they are also remote reviewers selected to provide more specialized knowledge on the proposals. Then panel members again gather together for panel meeting, and they conduct interviews remotely with starting and consolidator grant and advanced grant applicants. So the proposal is either funded or rejected and scores B. This is just a brief overview of the evaluation panel structure with the 3 main domains. I think the people in this meeting are probably most interested in SH1, individuals, markets, and organizations. I put in here 2 slides with the 16 descriptors of the SH1 panel with more detail on these specific descriptors that you can organize your proposal around. And then some debunking of some myths. So contrary to what you may think, the budget is distributed among the scientific panels as a function of demand. The panel descriptors do not represent ERC scientific priorities. The success rate is not linked to academic age. The publication record is not decisive in the selection decisions, and the host institution is not an evaluation criterion. So this is also made clear to the panel members. They are briefed before each panel evaluation process, and these are the guiding principles that everybody knows who participates in the process. There are some further rumors that I would like to debunk. You can only apply for, rumor number 1 is you can only apply for an ERC grant if you are a highly accomplished scientist. No, accomplishments are appreciated in relation to your stage, seniority, as giving some evidence of your conduct of research in the past decade of your career. Rumor number 2 is to be successful, you need to continue an established research line. Generally, the opposite is true. You need to show something new compared to, significantly new compared to what has already been done. Number 3, if you already obtain an ERC grant, you are less or more likely to get another one. No, panels look at each proposal on its own merit and in comparison with the other applications. And you have no, and it doesn't matter if you have obtained an ERC grant in the past, except for the proof of concept grant, which is given to already obtained ERC grantees. The more socially or medically relevant a grant proposal is, the higher chances of getting funded. No, the ERC funds frontier research, so not research that promises to be only incremental advancement. So it doesn't have to be more socially or medically relevant. It can be any idea that is a brilliant idea, basically. Anyone from anywhere in the world can apply. So grantees can keep affiliation with some home institute outside Europe, but a significant amount of the work time has to be in Europe, so at least 50%. Team members can be based outside Europe, and grantees can move within Europe with the grant. There is particular emphasis on frontier science, scholarship, and engineering. So multi or interdisciplinary proposals with cross boundaries between different fields of research, pioneering proposals addressing new and emerging fields of research, or proposals introducing unconventional, innovative approaches and scientific inventions. There are some changes that are coming our way in the work program in 2026. There is increased funding for researchers moving to Europe. So additional funding of up to 2 million euros for researchers currently based outside Europe applying for starting consolidated advanced grants. But this is additional funding for further eligible costs, where these are necessary to carry the proposed work for startup costs, major equipment, access to large facilities, major experimental and fieldwork costs.
Would you be going to the US?
Yes.
So on top of this, ERC has always offered additional funding for major costs not covered by the main grant. Applicants already based in EU member states or associated country remain eligible for the 1 million euro of additional funding. So if outside of Europe, 2 million, if inside Europe, 1 million. And what is really new is the ERC is working on a new funding instrument to offer ambitious researchers substantial funding for up to 7 years, so not 5, but 7, as part of the Choose Europe for Science initiative. Now this new scheme has a name, it's called ERC Plus, and the Scientific Council is just working out the final arrangements for this. Further details on this will arrive by the end of the year with an update of the 2026 work program. So, but as changes in the grant application, a new structure of the scientific proposal will be introduced. So the scientific proposal part 1 is up to 5 pages, should describe the overall idea of the proposed research project, so what it is doing. And part 2, which is up to 7 pages or 10 pages for the synergy grants, should describe the implementation in detail. So the methodology, the work plan, risk assessment, and so on. The panels will use part 1 for evaluation of step 1 and both parts together for evaluation of step 2. Approach to the evaluation in 2026 is that applications will be assessed on the ambition of their idea in advancing present-day knowledge in the fields based in part 1 of the scientific proposal. So this should go in part 1, and feasibility of the scientific approach will no longer be assessed as step 1. The proposed timescales and resources will be assessed as step 2 of the evaluation. So this is new, and the PI time commitment will be verified during the eligibility checks. What changes in the following year in 2027? The eligibility period for starting and consolidated grant schemes will be widened. So from 27 onwards, researchers will be eligible to apply for starting grant immediately after successfully defending their PhD, so they don't have to wait for 2 years anymore, and at any time within the following 10-year period. Consolidated grant applications will be eligible to apply between 5 and 15 years after defending their PhD, and researchers will be awarded no more than 1 starting grant and 1 consolidated grant during their research career, for their career. The rules of the extension of the eligibility periods will remain in place. This is the 25-26 calendar. So the consolidator grant opens on 25 September, so in a couple of weeks. Starting grants are ready, and the synergy grants are already open since July, mid-July, and the starting grant deadline is 14 October. If you would like to find out more, we offer videos on YouTube about how to apply, what to consider before application, how to fill in the application forms, details about the interview and how the evaluation works. So I think this is quite a lot of material out there to prepare. And you can also follow us on social media, because if there's anything new, something changes in the work program, there are webinars regularly, so it's good to know if you want to keep on top of what is happening. For example, on in mid-July, there was a webinar on 10th of July on the new work program. So if you search for that on YouTube for ERC work program, 10th of July webinar, you can find out more details about the 2026 work program and maybe a bit about the ERC Plus grants. So that is for me. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to the rest of the seminar.
Thanks a lot, Veronica. Now we pass to Marianne Gousset to talk about her experience as a recent grantee. The floor is yours.
Okay, hi, can you hear me and see my slides? Yes. Okay, so I'm Marianne Gousset. I'm an associate professor at Crest and EAYE, and last year I received an ERC starting grant on the subject on skills markets, marriage and labor. And so the idea is this project is to explore the matching of workers to jobs under family constraints, geographic constraints, and the complex skill sets needed in production. And so the idea is to develop new matching models that explores the interactions between the marriage market and the labor market. So now I will try to share some practical tips based on my application experience. So first, why I decided to apply. So I had what I thought a good idea, a promising research project, but that was very ambitious. So I needed help, and so I needed some fund to hire some people to work with me. So research assistant, PhD student, postdoc researchers. And the project was novel, but also in relation to my past work. So I did work a lot on the merge market, on the search and matching model of the merge market. So that now it was like a big extension to relate it to the labor market too. And so it means I had the comparative advantage to develop the project. So it was a good project for me to lead it. And also I saw that I had reasonable chances of success. Why? Because I was reviewing some other successful candidates in similar topics, and I saw they had similar resumes, similar publication records. So if they got it, why not me? So I had good publication records. I had no solo author paper, but I had worked with many different co-authors, senior and juniors. So this must be a strength to have a very diversified panel of co-authors and not only one or two. And I had an international experience and an international network. So this would be my strength. So I applied twice. First time I was shortlisted, and so I went to step 2 and I was auditioned, but I was not funded. And I applied the second time, and this time it was successful. After the first time, I received a very helpful feedback from referees, and this helped me a lot to rewrite the project to make it a success the next year. The second submission then was very close to the first one, but I really focused on the methodology and the methods. In fact, the main criticism I received after my first submission from the referees was that the project was very ambitious and very relevant, so that was very good, but I was not reassured. They was not convinced that I would be able to succeed, and so I need to work much more on the details. So it helped me a lot to rewrite the project, just to focus on more the details, the methodology, and it was very helpful. So now the project started last January, and since January I have recruited a 3-year PhD student and 2-year postdoc to work with me, several areas during the summer and several areas to come, and I've planned already research stays with my collaborators. So it's on track. So some tips for help writing the proposal. So I had a look at other successful proposals. I think it helps. I think I've looked at 4 or 5 successful proposals. They were all very different, all in the structure, but still it helps me to see what you need to insist on and how work package work, and so it was I think it was useful to read the successful ones. I also had the regular meetings with a non-specialist reviewer. So I think the ERC has some contact points everywhere in Europe, and so there was this person from University of Rennes where I work that helped me regularly. We had roughly 2 meetings per month over 5 months, where I had to make the writing advance, and so it helps me a lot. Even if it was a non-specialist at all, he was not a scientist, not an economist, but he just helped me to improve clarity, structure, narratives. Just make check that the writing was interesting and clear. And I had also additional reviews by colleagues, more experts in economics or in the fields. In the end, when it was more polished already, and I iterated a lot. For the oral presentation, so we had a 5-minute. You have a 5-minute talk usually with some slide. I think it was 7 slides for me. I think it changes every year. But first you have these 5 minutes where you can speak, you're not interrupted. And so I practiced it a lot. I knew it by heart. And I had several mock interviews that were extremely helpful too, with varied researchers and even non-specialists who were trying to ask me different questions, challenging questions. And I had to prepare concise answers to those questions. So I have made a list of all the questions I had during my mock interviews, but also all the questions that I thought I could receive, and I really prepare each of them, prepare to answer them in a concise way. Finally, some random advice. So I think it's so I applied twice consecutively, and I think it's important to prepare to apply more than once. Also because from 1 year to the other, the panels, the panel is completely different, and panels slightly different tests. And so maybe also 1 year the panel does not really into your subject, but the year after they are more likely to like it. So probably it helps too. It's important to be ambitious. I mean, that was really a strength of my first submission and the second one. All the referees report, at least the project is ambitious, so that's great. But of course, show feasibility. Maybe by showing that you have started pilot project or preliminary work on it to convince and to reassure. And then, yes, the whole process of the proposal writing and preparation is very valuable as such, because it helps you to structure your research, to plan the next papers you want to work on, and so all this is really valuable regardless of outcome. I think.
Well, thanks a lot for this nice and inspiring presentation. Now we pass the floor to another recent grantee, Sarah Oster from University of Bonn.
That was wrong. Okay, so I hope you can see this. Okay, so hi, I'm Sarah Oster. I'm at the University of Bonn. I'm a professor there, and as Marion, I was awarded the ERC starting grant last year, and I started in January 2025. So my project is in economic theory, and the main goal of the project was to revisit some important and classical questions in economic theory, information economics, related to incentives to acquire information and to disseminate information in situations where the uncertainty is more fundamental in the sense that agents find it difficult to confidently quantify and describe the relevant odds of the problem. Okay, so just a little bit of how things developed for me. So I started to think about writing an ERC proposal roughly a year before the actual deadline. And during this time, or throughout the year, I had 3 related research ideas around which I built the proposal. And at the time of writing, they were at different stages. And that was also reflected a little bit in the proposal. So I organized this into work packages, and since it was a theory proposal, like Marion, I tried to be relatively concrete. So in particular, I was very precise on what the theory or what the theoretical framework would be. Then, of course, in terms of results, it was these were research ideas. I had some preliminary results for parts of the projects. For others, I just had illustrative examples. But I was basically at a stage where I could see where things could be going. And I think what I tried to emphasize as well was not only the questions itself. So I think I tried to convince the readers of the proposal that the problem was important and that there are many contexts in which these questions were relevant, but I also emphasized the methodological contribution. So I really tried to sort of make a case for, I tried to build a toolbox that we can use then to sort of address these new questions. Most of the time in terms of preparing the proposal was really spent on the big picture. And this I found extremely useful because it was at a time where I was already out of the PhD for quite a few years. So kids help for the starting grant. Anyway, and it was a time to reflect a little bit on some of the work that I had done and that I was going to do. And so I really had to step back and think a little bit about how are things connected, why does it matter, where could this field be going? And then in this process, new research ideas actually came up, and I think this helped me a lot in general to strengthen this agenda. I have to say I spent most of my time on this project thinking rather than writing. So my writing time was much shorter. I think it was 2.5 weeks in the end. So it's not something that I would recommend. But again, I had sort of thought through everything and I had the frameworks to build on. And so it was really for me more a matter of, putting things together and writing things down. There are many things that come up at the end. So that's why I would not recommend this strategy to anyone. So in particular, one has to build a budget, one has to, think about all these forms and many different aspects of the proposal. In Bonn, we had very good institutional support that I used for that. But this is something that is probably good to start earlier, actually. All right, so then at some point I got the happy news that I was invited for an interview. And there was quite an intense preparation for this interview. So again, this was to a big part institutionalized at my university. So we had professional coaches for the interview, and we also had mock sessions where other professors who had been recently awarded ERC grants were there to practice this interview. I thought I had 6 minutes, but maybe it was 5 minutes. So it's a very short time in which you can actually present the proposal. And I found the preparation for this actually quite painful. It reminded me a lot of the job market. So there was basically a lot at stake in a very short time. And also, of course, the feedback was also very similar. It's always painful to hear criticism, but then in the end, you learn a lot. And in every round that I practiced this, I think the presentation did get better. And I revised it several times quite drastically. So I think one should be ready to just throw out things. for the Q&A sessions, I thought this was also extremely helpful. So I didn't prepare every possible questions, but when you do this a few times, I think there are always questions that come up repeatedly, and then it really helps. And here it helps especially to have colleagues that are not exactly in your field. So my non-theorist colleagues typically ask me what would be an example of this, or what is the relevance of that. These were things that in the end I could prepare quite well. And then of course they came up in the panel too. And in terms of just the presentation itself of the proposal, it was I tried to find a balance because especially when you get advice from people who are actually not economists, I think sometimes there are ideas that work for some but don't work for all. So I think, for example, many people try to push me to include more pictures, to make it more lively. And to me, this always had this B-school kind of feeling. So I tried this. I also tried to incorporate examples, and then I never really felt comfortable with it. And so in the end, I compromised and sort of found a solution that was maybe more on the theory side. But I think it is important to actually present your research in a way that you are comfortable with it. So I also took a screenshot of my actual slides. So I also had 6 slides. They are pretty minimalistic. I think it's just important to prepare well in the sense that you don't think about what to say at which point. So it is a little bit like really like at the job market. So it's the spiel. So this is the part that you can prepare super well. And then the questions is a little bit, that's the part where it becomes more tricky. So I got through in the first round. Or not in the first round, but with my first try, I was extremely happy because after my interview, I wasn't actually that sure. I think they sometimes get questions or they take the questions from the referees, and it's sort of hard to figure out what the panel actually thinks. But I think it's actually best to not think too much about what they think, because in the end, it's very hard to predict whether you get it. And I worked on this project now for a little bit more than half a year, and I feel like I already benefited a lot from it. So it really gave me time. This is the main shortage, at least for me. And so these projects actually developed quite quickly, and it even like expanded in scope a little bit. I'm extremely grateful for this, for being awarded this grant. All right, I think that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. So now we move to another part of the process, that's the panels. And I would like to pass the floor to Jana Kaut, who has been in HS1 panel. And then him and I, we will comment on how do we see things from the other side. Jan?
Thank you, Nezi. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So what's going on in the smoke-filled room when the decisions are made about the applications? So there's about 15 panel members. There's people like Veronica who are also in the room, who are from the ERC organization, who help out. And as you know, there's 2 stages. The first stage is only evaluated by panel members. So basically your first part is only read by panel members. Then they do that in advance. Then they come for a meeting to Brussels. They decide on a ranking of each of the proposals. And then there's a decision to be made as to how you're positioned, whether you are eligible for going to the next round, or whether you're decided to not receive funding in the first round. And then it goes to the second round. What happens in the second round? Now the 2 parts are being put together. Now it's going out to around roughly 10 referees. It could be 15, it could be 8, but there's a lot of referees. There's, of course, a number of referees who don't respond, but we aim to have at least 8 referee reports. And these referees now send in their evaluation of the project. They are asked to also give a certain rating on the proposals. And then this now is going back to the panel members, different panel members, it could be the same, who now read part 1 and part 2, get the whole piece of the information, the full proposal, plus the referee reports and the evaluations of the referees. And then every one of the panel members comes back to Brussels. We hear every applicant's interview. So there's a 5-minute presentation, as both Sarah and Marion have illustrated. There's Q&A for 20 minutes. And then based on that, a ranking is made. And again, there's a discussion about what's going on. So the first thing I would like to say is that you probably hear certain rumors. I like what Veronica did in terms of what kind of rumors there are. I find it, so I've done this for 8 years. We do it for 4 times, 1 year on, 1 year off. And so since I started 8 years ago, I've just finished. I find it each time remarkable how objective it is. You might disagree with the objectivity, and there may be different opinions in the sense that there's people from different fields, but people use the rankings of the referees in an objective way. They're aggregated in an objective way. People, panel members' evaluations are not just subjective opinions. They're grading on certain scales, and these numerical scales are actually followed quite closely. So in that sense, I always thought ex ante, if I would have seen certain rankings kind of revert dramatically, I've never seen that. So there's there's a lot of opinions. There's wisdom of the crowd in the sense that there's quite a few people weighing in on this. The referees, the 10 referees say, and then the 15 panel members, and that information is kind of aggregated in a fairly robust way. I always found that quite remarkable. And if you think about the comparison with submitting to journals, in a journal, there's, one editor and maybe 3 referees, so that's 4 opinions. Here we have something like 25 opinions, 10 referees and 15 panel members. Of course, there's differences of opinion, and it continues to be subjective because there's an aggregation of fields from economics, macro, micro, econometrics to management to finance to all different fields, and that makes it, in a sense, also subjective and also hard to do. But again, the objectivity that's part of that plays a big role. There's something new from this year. Before there was a part B1, B2. It doesn't matter what it was. That's the past. Now it's part 1 and part 2, 5 pages and 7 pages, if I got it correctly. I think one thing from the viewpoint of the panel is that, in my view, 1 should have everything that there is to be known, and part 2 should just have more something like an appendix and details that if people are interested, of the readers, that is the referees and the panel members, that they can dig deeper. The reason why I'm saying this is that this part 1 is going to go first to the round that is only the panel members. You have to get past that round. If panel members come to a conclusion, they say, this is too vague, I don't see what's going on here, you're likely not to be picked to go to the second round. So it's important to not stay vague, even if you only have 5 pages. And if you want to talk about some methodological issues, I think you should also do that in part 1, because it's a big hurdle to get to part 2. Of course, you have the 7 pages on the part 2 component that you get in the second round, and you can you can use that to go into detail and be more technical. Use certain details of how you obtain certain results. But I would definitely mention some of these things in part 1. Now, in general, a lot of questions come up that people say, why should I apply? Again, Veronica had some of these myths or these preconceived ideas that people have. I think there's a bunch of reasons why to do this. One is that itself is a learning process. It's a learning process. I've also been an applicant in terms of applying. When you get rejected, you learn how the process works, and you learn how to write the proposal. And I think this is extremely useful. So, I forget whether it's Marion or Sarah who mentioned that, if you get rejected, you apply again. It's like a revise and resubmit process of a paper to a journal. And no one will doubt that this is positive in the sense that, we all hate it, don't get me wrong, to do it, but it's positive in the sense that there is, if you get good reports, of course, there's good feedback, there's useful feedback, and this is helpful. And this is helpful for your refereeing process, but it's also helpful for your research, because ultimately, and this is, I think, an undervalued aspect of the ERC applications, is that this helps you make kind of think more carefully about your research, maybe at an earlier stage than you usually would do, because you write something up that's not finished. You write about something that, you know, you still have to do certain very fundamental work on it, but at the same time, you're already trying to get an idea of where this is going. I think this is extremely useful. So it's not just the learning about writing grants, it's also the learning about, you know, fine-tuning your research, that particular set of research questions that you're addressing, but also in general about doing research. And in a sense, I wouldn't make too much of a difference between you submitting to journals in that process versus submitting to the ERC as part of the general research process. Again, it's an earlier stage, but it also has this feedback part, and you get the peer review, which I think is extremely useful. You get, if you get to round 2, you get 10 referee reports plus the evaluation of the panel. That's extremely useful. Now, sometimes people ask me who's on the panel. It's not known. So the only person who's known is the panel chair, and that's being made public. The other panel members are made public potentially later. I've never found a very systematic publication of the names, but you can find out in the past. If you're really, really eager to know, you will never know who's sitting there. And it's a bit of, you know, a nuisance when you go into this interview, this online interview. The screen opens and then you see the room and you're trying to figure out who's there. But, you know, and it's a bit unfortunate, but that's the way the ERC has set it up. If you'd like to figure out, one thing that could be helpful is to look back at the panel 2 years before. Why? Because the panels sit there for periods for 8 years, but 1 year on, 1 year off. And so you see the panel from 2 years ago, and probably about 3/4 of that panel will still be the same. There will be rotations over the ones who are finishing and who are moving out. If that is something that you would like to figure out, maybe you can talk to people who have applied 2 years before. Again, there's not much to be done about that. It's like with journals, if you know the editor, it might be useful, and there may be subjective opinions, but ultimately it's also a matter of a quite variety of different people with different interests that are sitting there. And I think that's the best way I think to approach it, of thinking about this as a diverse panel of experts on different topics. Marion and Sarah referred to the interview. I think the interview is very important, and I would say that more so than your 5-minute presentation, which is important, but I think the Q&A is the big thing. And they both said exactly what seems to be working from the panel side. If you have the feeling that the candidate has thought about certain questions, and the typical question is, is this identified? What kind of instrument are you going to use? All these type of questions that are more on the methodological side tend to come up. They also can be big picture questions, motivational questions. And I think it's important there to really practice with your colleagues in your institution and get an idea of what type of questions people might have, because it's where I've seen most of the big changes in the ranking, where people either perform very well or underperformed in the Q&A. And the sense is that, we had some doubts about the proposal because not everything came out. It didn't transpire until in the interview that this is really good. We didn't really fully understand what was going on, maybe because there was some issue the way it's written, or maybe because, as the readers, we didn't fully figure it out. But then when you get to ask the questions, you can see really whether the proposal and the candidate is on top of it. And I think this is really a key component of the whole process. Last thing I want to say, and I think my time has been up by now, but I want to say that these are 5-year grants, and what are the issues where panels kind of stumble over? One of the issues is that panels stumble over is that there's not enough material. Okay, and the typical thing, people call it work packages, sections, you can call it whatever you want, but ultimately the way to think about it is how many papers are in there. And I think it's good to think, in terms of papers, that it's about 3 or maybe 4 papers. You can have 2 sections with 2 subsections, and that would be 2 papers or something like that. Why? Because these panels say this is funding for 5 years. If you're a productive researcher, how many papers do you write? Successful quality papers, that's probably 3 or 4. okay? And I'm not talking about where they end up published. It's just that, you know, in those 5 years, what can you do? And I think the implicit thinking, this has never come up like explicitly, but the implicit thinking is that if we fund someone for 5 years, this is what we would like to see as an output. And I think you want to signal that from the start, that this is the amount of work that you have. And if you see someone talk about one big project, and implicitly there may be 3 or 4 papers in there, but if it doesn't transpire exactly that this is going to happen, you know, you're going to get questions. There's not enough material here, okay? The second thing where there's a lot of debate about in the panel discussions is this done before? Okay, and everyone does work on stuff that they're good at, they've done in the past, that they've been successful in the past. Now, the last thing you want to give is the impression that either you have a working paper, it's all done and it's on your website, and then, you know, what's in the working paper is exactly the same as what's in your proposal. Or you have a paper that is published and you say, I'm going to do kind of an epsilon variation of that. And I think by now it's clear that the ERC is not very happy about that type of research. And I think for good reasons. And so I think it's important to make clear that what you're doing is something that is, you know, at the same time innovative, and it's something new that you're doing, but also sufficiently advanced. And here you have to walk a thin line because, you know, you want to show results. I think it was Sarah who said, I have some preliminary results. So you have to have done work. If you have data, you're going to have to show some analysis on your data. Some, you know, you've run some regressions, you estimated a model. It's still preliminary, but you have to show something. And I think it's this fine line between having advanced results and show enough kind of analysis rather than have vague descriptions of what you want to do versus not showing that this is something that's already done. And I think there it's kind of a subtle thing that you have to really be careful about. I think that's about it. I'll be happy to answer any more questions if they come up. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jan. Let me add, I mean, I would re-emphasize a couple of things. Like Jan, I have been involved for a long time with the SH1 panels. So one thing, you know, Jan mentioned about the names of the panel members, etc. Sometimes I get questions, well, I mean, should I cite panel members, etc.? I mean, don't. I mean, of course, there might be a panel member that you think, or someone who might be in your panel that fits your research and you have to cite, of course. So, but then strategizing, I mean, that doesn't pay off and shouldn't be done, okay? And don't worry about the panel. Panels can change. You should just focus on your project and preparation. Another thing about the interview. I mean, in the interview there can be, again, detailed questions and big picture questions. It's very important to, you know, to be able to differentiate them. So because sometimes there will be very precise questions about a methodological issue or about a particular project you have, and you're expected to give precise answers. Don't try to, you know, give a, you know, wishy-washy short answers. Just, I mean, it has to be short because time is valuable, but you have to give precise answers. And there could be some big picture question. You have to be ready to do that switch. Okay, so and remember, time is your most valuable asset in an interview, and you have to, you know, use your time wisely. And differentiating these two type of questions and how you answer them differently is important. About the presentation, Sarah mentioned that what's important is what you feel comfortable with. Okay, you know, you can get a presentation of your colleagues, your friends, etc. But at the end of the day, it has to be your presentation and you have to be comfortable with. And I would emphasize something that keeps occurring, and this is really difficult because ERC is, you know, awarding forward-looking projects. So this is not something done. It shouldn't be a working paper on your web page. But on the other hand, it should be, you know, it should be advanced enough in your head or in the writing that people should have a clear view of what you are doing. And that's for many people, this is the most difficult part. Marion mentioned that in her presentation, that in her second time she applied, she provided more details in methodology, and she thought that made a difference because it's, you know, you have to have a big idea. It shouldn't have been done. It has to be precise enough So it's not an easy thing. So that's why it requires some thinking, passing it with your colleagues, and that's the most difficult part of writing an ERC grant. And on that, let me conclude with one last comment. When you write this part 1 and part 2, I mean, there could be a tendency, I mean, Jan mentioned this, just make part 1, just, big picture, why this is great, etc. But don't say too much about how you're going to do it. You're not expected to provide details on the methodology, but there should be some sense of, how you are going to do it. And people, again, the committee should see a clear path to a final product. Okay, so let me end here our presentation, and I will open the floor for questions. But as I mentioned, we have 2 members from the European Association of Young Economists, Teresa Esteban Casanellas from King's College and Javier Rodriguez Ramon from Goethe University in Frankfurt. I will pass the floor to them, first ask the questions. Meanwhile, other participants, we have a large number of participants. If you have any question, you can raise your hand and go ahead, or write your question on the chat. But for now, let's start with Teresa and Javier if they have any questions for the panel members.
Sure. Francisco, do you want to start, or should I?
Yes. Do you want me to go through Duarte's questions?
I had some questions on my own, so I can just bundle them together, and I'll just ask a few, and then maybe you can answer. I have a bunch, so we'll see. So some of them you've already kind of discussed them a bit. So how early we should start preparing before submission deadline? Then in terms of preliminary results, so thank you, Jan, for addressing that. So we should have some. What happens with, for instance, papers that focus more on theory? What kind of preliminary work or results would be appropriate without having a full working paper? And then what are the kind of more common reasons why projects get rejected in the first stage versus in the second stage? And then in terms of, when to apply in one's career, should we just try to apply as soon as possible if we think we have a good project, and, if we get rejected, then at least we get a good feedback? Or should we wait until we think we've built a stronger CV in terms of publications? And this links to a question in terms of what is the weight on your publication record versus the strength of the proposal. I think that those are my first questions. Javier, I don't know if you want to, Francisco, I don't know if you want to.
Maybe we want to, otherwise we will forget the questions. So maybe
sorry.
These first, and then get to the list. I mean, I don't know if any of the panelists want to pick up any of the questions and say something.
I mean, I can say something about, you had different questions. So one about the difference between being rejected at 1 and at 2. Of course, we don't have good counterfactuals because they're rejected. But I have the impression that at least of the ones that go through, the ranking doesn't vary much. So we have a ranking of stage 1, and then there's a cutoff. But then in stage 2, still a number of proposals get rejected too. And we see, that's what I was referring to earlier, remarkably little change in that ranking. Remarkably, there is change, don't get me wrong. And if there's anything that makes a difference, it's the Q&A from the interview part, because that's where there's new information. The referee reports do add new information too, but I would say that typically, you get 10 referees, it doesn't move the dial that much in a way, because we've already in stage 1 had, the 15 panel members weighing in on it. So there's already wisdom of crowds there. There's a lot of opinions. People might have different opinions. I'm not saying that there may not be polarized opinions, but if you then add 10 referee reports to that, they tend to reflect the distribution. I think that's a good sign. That's just saying that that's the information. So if anything that changes between stage 1 and stage 2, it would be the Q&A from the interview session.
And then let me, on your question about, when to apply. I mean, Veronica can correct me if I'm wrong. In one of the earlier presentations when we did similar events, I had seen a picture which shows, success rate with respect to how long you've been out of PhD. And I remember it was pretty flat. So it, of course, there is selection, because maybe people who have, apply sooner, they think they have better projects. I think, we have to think about, whether you have a good project. My feeling also over years is that the emphasis on CV, CV plays a lesser role than in the past. At least that's my kind of impression in the panels. There's much more emphasis on the project. So I mean that's how I see it. Yeah. There were, I think, 2 more questions on your part. When to start, and about on the theory part, what could be some preliminary results. I don't want to make comments on the theory part. I don't know if Sarah or Jan wants to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say maybe, so of course, I just knew my proposal, but I also saw a few other ones of theorists. And again, I think sometimes it can also be a little bit varied across the different papers that are somehow in there. So I think some people do have first theorems, right? So it's not a complete paper, but maybe you have a first result that is important. And I think it's okay to state it. Of course, these are not going to be, or this may not be true for all of the papers. So in my case, for example, I was a little bit advanced on one, and I stated the results that I had. And then the other ones that were at a much earlier stage, and there maybe I established some property that would be important later on, or I really sort of looked at a simplified version of the model and said, okay, so if you make these and these and these restrictions, then you see this and this effect, and there was some kind of result. But of course, this was just sort of a proof that there could be something interesting going on. And then the goal of the work would be to really prove this or show this in a more general setting.
Okay, and regarding when to start, I mean, I think this is a little bit personal. I mean, some people, I guess you have to start thinking about it quite early, in my opinion. So, but then some people, think, maybe write small things and then sit down and do like one go with high adrenaline. And whereas others, start at building up smaller. But whatever you do, I mean, the disadvantage of doing it in a one go is that you will have less time to pass the final product with your colleagues. That's the but again, maybe if you are more productive like that, you're more productive like that. Doing it in a like let's say you put a 2-month writing period after you did some research, that will allow you with more for passing it to your colleagues and getting feedback. Okay. Meanwhile, before I pass the floor back to Javier, there are some questions on the Q&A that I want to address before we forget, and then we go to Javier. One question is, how are proposals built on ongoing work that recently received smaller funding from other agencies perceived? This is something that you report in your application, because there's a in the second part, I think now in part 2. You have to reveal all the grants you have, and how this is related scientifically or monetarily to your current proposal. My feeling is that as long as these are preparatory grants that kind of builds your help you build the proposal, I don't think they perceived badly. Again, Veronica can correct me if
I think it's correct what you said.
Yeah. So.
Yes.
And but however, of course, if you already receive from a generous government, a lot of money to do the same field work or same big survey, that will be the questions. But when we talk about, you know, grants that are normal within the profession that we use to do research, I don't think they are perceived badly. Another question which I will pass to Veronica the floor on this. It would be great to understand more about additional funding about the 1.5 million for the starting grant. How does asking for additional funding for field work rather than including it in the main pot affect the evaluation of the proposal and the ultimate chance of success? Maybe it would be good to comment briefly about additional funding. Yeah.
So basically, the official guidance is that the requests for additional funding must be duly justified in the proposal, and the decision about it rests with the panel. And these are for costs like startup costs, major equipment, access to large facilities, major experimental and fieldwork costs. So basically, as long as it's justified and it's eligible costs, you explain what it is for. The panel evaluates if they understand what it is for, and it doesn't influence the success as long as it's justified and clear what it is for.
So this additional amount is not like something you first get the grant, you ask it later. It's in the same.
No, it's at the same
application. I think that's
so the same, the same panel decides at the same time. Yes.
Another question asks, given that part 1 and part 2 are relatively similar length, should part 2 only focus on additional material, or should it also cover the same things as part 1? I think here I want to check with Veronica. I mean, Jan commented that, you know, the first part is 5 pages, the second part is 7. I think the second one is pretty longer. It's like, I think it's like around 14 pages. No,
but now it changes a bit. But,
changes. Sorry,
yeah.
I mean, it is less.
I think because the reason why they make these changes is that they want to. There are lots of proposals and increasing number of proposals, and they want to condense it, make it easier for the panel members.
Right. I'm with all the information.
But it's also changing, so it's not necessary to come.
Again, I think you know, then it becomes even more important, Jan's comment about, you know, having a little bit of giving flavor of, you know, how you're going to do it, methodology in the first part, because in the second part you have just a little bit more part and you just have to go to more specifics, and something that is really specific that you have to emphasize is like Jan uses the analogy of appendix. No, I mean, like the 5 should be the key things, and then when you go to the second, use the additional part to make it a little bit more precise, a little bit more self-contained. Veronica, there's a question about how often do people have to submit a progress report? I really don't.
I think you get very detailed guidance on this when you get the grant. So it's I think that's the next presentation. But I think there are 2 scientific reports, and then there are some reports about the finance and the execution. So there are scientific reports that happens midterm and at the end, and I think there are 2 or 3 reports on how you spend the money.
Javier, you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you. So I have maybe 3 additional questions. So one is more like a summary, because I think Jan mentioned a couple of things, but maybe you can give us a sense of what are the maybe 3 most common mistakes you've seen in proposals that fail at the step 1. Then sort of like the inverse of that question, is there something that makes an application stand out positively? Something that you've seen that have positively surprised you in a way? And finally, how much does the interview change the outcome relative to the written proposal? So, yeah.
Yeah, Francisco, I think these are really the key issues. So the common mistakes, I would say a common mistake that I think I've seen, by the way, all proposals look very good. I mean, it's not an issue that some proposals are just not up to standard, but you know, I would say 80-90% in round 1 of the proposals are very good. And it's a tough decision, but if one proposal is more ranked towards the bottom, it's too vague. Okay, in the sense that it's very descriptive and it has wonderful ideas, but if you can sit in your armchair and think about it and come up with that as a proposal, okay, then someone else can do that too. And it's only once you start to touch the data or start to write down the model or start to do a little bit of an estimation that you get an idea of, you know, what I was thinking in my armchair, is that really working out or not? And you know, there's probably 300,000 or 400,000 economists who do research in the world. Okay. And so, you know, if you have that idea on something, there's going to be someone else who has had that idea. It's very different if someone sits down and does some work. And that's why a proposal probably takes a year, not to write, but to start thinking about it. Okay. And so that's the vagueness, I think, is one of the main things. The second thing, to a lesser extent, is the fact that it looks like one proposal, one paper, and then people say there's not enough material here. And I think that's probably the main issues. To come back to the vagueness, I mean, you know, I wasn't in the panel, but I heard that once someone who then later ended up winning a Nobel Prize that got rejected because the proposal was too vague. So, and this is not about CVs, clearly. Okay, this is about really doing the work of getting there. So that's the one thing. The ones that stand out, you know, as I said, in round one and for sure in round two, all these proposals are very good. So these are the type of things that you write that are pre-published papers in probably top journals. Okay, so these are very good. This is very good research. And in fact, you know, I can tell you how painful it is on these panels, but there's something very good about it, is that you learn about a lot of stuff in a very short period of time, because you get to see, you know, 80, 90 proposals in round one, and another 30 in round two, the same ones, but now more elaborate. And so, you know, they're all very good. It's a little bit, you know, it's hard to say what is good about it. And unlike with the ones, the common mistakes with the good ones is that, you know it, and everyone who would see it would know it, that it's a good one. It's probably a combination of, you know, ticking enough boxes. One, it's a great idea. Two, there's something very fascinating about the methodology, how the person does it, you know, what type of things they use to prove what they're proving. Is it causality or something like that? And three, it may be something to do with some novelty, something like data or some kind of, you know, new way of thinking about it. But I think these are the three things that if you tick those boxes in a big way, that's what's making a proposal good. I know I'm vague here, but it's one of these things that, because again, if we all knew what the good proposals were, we would all write them. And sometimes it takes you to write one, like with a paper, and then you think, oh, this was a great idea to start, and then you, by the end, you've done all the work. It's not such a great idea anymore for many reasons. Maybe it's too obvious, or maybe you thought you're going to get something, it's not there. Or, you know, I've had papers when I started and I thought this is not worth it, but I'll do it. And then it turns out that people are very excited about it. You don't realize where the excitement is coming from. And it's more like that, you know, something that is hard to measure. By the way, that's also a reason why I think applying is the best thing you can do to figure it out. Because notice that with a paper, you probably add another 60, 70, 80% of time to it to get it finished. With a proposal, you do some work. And that's going in, and you get very good feedback from, again, 15 panel members, 10 referees. So you get 25 people who give you an opinion on that. And that's, I think, very valuable by itself to figure out how that is. So I would use that. I forget now what your last question was.
About the interviews, how interviews can change things. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's again in the Q&A. If you get, you know, in a good way, there was something maybe not clear in terms of your methodology, you answer that, you nail it, that's going to change it. And on the negative way, you know, you get a question, you can't answer it, or you're kind of not very clear on it. I've seen this more with exciting proposals. People are excited and then digging a little bit deeper, scratching the surface, and then finding out, this looked good, but, you know, now that we understand how this is going to be done, this is kind of moving down.
So on the most common mistakes, I mean, the vagueness is super important. Another thing that is important is the coherence. I mean, it's because this is a grant proposal. This is not like collection of potentially good papers that will appear in good publications, but, you know, they have nothing to do with each other. I think this is something that ERC has been paying more and more attention over time. It's not like, you know, I have a good CV, here are 5 good papers, give me money. That's not the idea. So it has to be a project on an idea, and then that has to be the different parts has to put link together. In the interview, I think the one thing that I mean, again, this is part of the practice. So if there's an obvious question and you have no clue, I mean, that looks really bad. I mean, come on. I mean, this is like you write this proposal. This is the first thing that anybody would ask, and you didn't think about this. That's that doesn't look good. So that's why the practice part is quite important. Okay, if there are no other questions, or I would also like to hear Marion and Sarah if you have anything to add, given the different questions we have heard. I think we come to an end because
sorry, I have someone sent me 2 questions to myself, so I'll just ask them if that's all right.
So we have also a question from Bruno Conte afterward.
So how do the reviewers see proposals that partly rely on collaboration with other researchers that are not on the proposal themselves? And how ambitious should a starting grant proposal be in terms of the research team that the applicant wants to manage?
I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with having a project. There's a proposal that is a paper that will be, co-authored with someone, and this someone is not part of the project. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, this is perfect. I mean, I think there are many proposals have, parts that are co-authored with people, and they are part of the team, but they are not like co-PIs, or they're not going to have any financial benefit from the project. This is the standard practice. No, Veronica, that's how I see it.
Yes, that's exactly.
So, and then the second part was, sorry, second question was?
How ambitious should a starting grant proposal be in terms of the research team that the applicant wants to manage?
I mean, here it has to be a good fit. I mean, like in the sense that the team has to, the PI plus the team has to convince the panel that they are the right people to do that research. So it's not like, this is not about if you're a junior person having lots of senior people, etc. There has to be basically a team that looks good, and they can convince the panel that they can do it. I don't know if Jan, you want to add anything on that?
Yes, I mean, I would say there's usually not that much discussion about the team, actually. Exactly. The one, maybe some red or orange flags come up in terms of, if it's only with very senior co-authors, just like with the job market candidate evaluations or recruiting, that you say, how much is that person doing on it? I would say that would be the only type of discussion. In general, I think it's positive that there's good co-authors on it. I think it's positive that there's many on it, that there's many different people, because our profession now, is highly collaborative. I mean, we're moving to more co-authors on every single paper. So we got also moving towards more co-authors on all of these research proposals that go to the ERC. So I think in general, it's positive. I think the best thing is to be as clear as possible, to be as transparent as possible, to describe, what you're doing, who's involved and why. But again, this is not, I would say, not the main issue. The main issue is always the content, talking about what is it that you're proposing to do in this research.
I mean, one thing that can help is that imagine you write a proposal you want to expand your research on a direction, but that direction requires very specific talent. For example, I mean, you have never run experiments in your life and you want to do an experimental research. I mean, if your team doesn't have anybody experimental, the panel might think, okay, how is this person going to do that? Kind of discussion occurs in the panel. Okay, this is a good idea, but whether the PI and the team have the right expertise. So in that sense, it's more about the expertise, not about who they are. Okay, we have a question.
Maybe can I just add one small thing, because this was actually the point where I got most of the criticism for, because so when I wrote my proposal, I asked for a postdoc position as part of the team, and I think I didn't explain well enough why I need this position, and this is something that several reviewers actually pointed out along the lines, I don't see why she can't do this by herself. So I think especially when when it makes up a big chunk of the costs. I think it is very important to properly justify why this position is needed, or maybe even think about it more carefully before. So this is something that I would have done better in retrospect, I think.
That's your
Now Bruno.
Hi, thanks everyone for this. I'm going to be very quick. I just wanted to confirm or sort of make sure I understand one point that was raised a few times on this aspect of, is there enough material type of aspect behind a proposal, right? Because if we read very carefully the instructions in the ERC by the criteria, part 1 and part 2 are going to be evaluated. In principle, a project that is going to take 30–40% of the time of a PI, but satisfy all the conditions of ambitions, breakthrough in the research frontier, as well as asking resources that are coherent with what they are expected to do, this in principle should be a valuable project, even if ultimately it delivers only one paper. What I guess I read that is a common discussion, that's what I wanted to clarify, is that most of the times panels expect to have a sort of project that achieves a sort of a level of output along the lines that were discussed here. Is this a good reasoning, or did I gotten anything wrong? Thank you.
I mean, so let me, of course, imagine that, you know, like, I mean, it depends how come, I mean, it could be one paper, but you have to convince the panel that you're going to use your 5 years and like, you know, 1 million or more resources towards this paper. Maybe you want to start collecting a new data that nobody has collected. You will use the, you know, lots of resources to collect the data for 2 years, and but so there has to be or a very extensive field work. You know, if you can justify that could be one paper, there is no magic rule. But in general, the way we operate in economics, you know, people expect that in 5 years, you know, you start to say 3–4 projects, and even if it is like one topic, usually it's very easy to think that, you know, it doesn't lead to one paper into multiple papers. So it's a matter of, you know, how you have to think that, you know, panel has to see a clear justification why. I mean, there has to be a clear justification, clear explanation of the process that will lead to one paper. 5 years, lots of money. If you think you can justify that, it's perfectly fine. But it will raise some question whether, you know, this is not, because it's not how, you know, the profession typically operates. Yeah.
I mean, just on this issue, I've seen proposals, for example, you know, in using historical data. Okay, and there's a lot of money and resources and time required to collect this, but then still, you know, I'm going to collect data for 4 years and then I'm going to write 3 papers, because I think it also makes sense to fund certain endeavors to say, well, you know, there's more than one question in there, right? And so again, as Nezi says, if it's one paper, there's nothing wrong with it. Just, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. But in general, I think it's hard to find situations where a big push for something, however valuable it is going to come with one publication, because it's so valuable. Then there must be different side questions attached to it. And I think ultimately, you know, if the debate would be, oh, great, 4 years for data collecting, but what do we get in the end? Okay, and it's a way to measure that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay, there is one more question in the chat, which asks, what is your experience with the evaluation of applications flagged as interdisciplinary? For instance, the social science and humanities panel includes SH37, social policies, welfare, work and employment, and SH38, poverty and poverty alleviation, both of which are certain topics economists also work on. Honestly, I don't have, I don't know, Veronica might give us a little bit of an institutional sense of this.
What happens in And what happens in this case is that we ask for a cross-panel review from that panel if we feel the expertise in the panel is missing, or you can indicate a secondary panel that you think your proposal could fit into. So basically, we look for that expertise which is more specific to another panel. It also happens with SHA7. It can also happen with physics panels. It's not only even in the social sciences and humanities, but it can also happen across domains that we ask for cross-panel reviews. That's my view on
So my experience both as a referee and on the panel is very hard. So as a referee, I've seen, so I've done referee work for other panels. And it's, I mean, this is just a statement of my ignorance. It's just so hard to evaluate things outside your field. I mean, because the methodology is different, the language is different. It's so difficult. Second, if you get on the panel a kind of interdisciplinary proposal, which has then referees and panel evaluations from other panels, this, you know, these tend to be highly polarized in the sense that, you know, whatever the panel that you're on thinks is just orthogonal to what the other panel thinks. And I mean, I sound negative, and it's probably just my experience on that. And it's not just on one case. I've seen many cases. I think it's more a statement about what the kind of the state of research in general is that we're very highly working in silos, separated, very little cross-pollination, and that's the reality, and it's mainly in terms of methodology. And I find it very hard to see kind of successful proposals coming out. At least I haven't seen one that has been successful. Does that mean that you shouldn't do it? I don't think so. There's spaces where it works better, and I've seen more successful ones, which are on the synergy grounds, but these are the superstars. So this is like the Piketty's and the SAISes, who basically come up with kind of an interdisciplinary proposal, but that's because there's interdisciplinary PIs on it. And that's a very different ball game, I think, because they start from this the beginning to integrate it. But again, this is a very personal opinion. I don't want to kind of, you know, give the idea here that we shouldn't do interdisciplinary research. To the contrary, it's just that my experience with the results was what it was.
I mean, my view is that it's very easy to fall between cracks. So that's the problem, in the sense that, I mean, doing true interdisciplinary research where both more than one panel appreciates what you do is difficult. It can be done, I mean, you know, but this is, you have to be really sure that, you know, that's the path you want. I mean, in the sense that you write, you submit to SH1, and then you think that the people in the SH1 will appreciate what you do, and then people in SH3 will say, oh, this is great, and there will be some kind of, they will reinforce each other. What you don't want is, you know, one group says, okay, it is okay, but you know, and others say, yeah, I mean, that doesn't help. You're better off going to just one group. So there's always danger of falling between cracks, which you have to take into account. Okay, I think we have been here 1 hour and a half almost. I would. At some point, we had, you know, for close to 200 people. This is a great success. I would like to thank all the panelists and all the participants. We are recording the event, and we will post at EA's webpage. And for participants who are planning to apply to ERC grants, best of luck, and keep trying. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.